You're probably wondering what the hell this video is even about, but let me just warn you first. I don't even know. Is this a rant? Is this informative? Let's leave that to my fingers. It's no denying anymore, ZZZ is now chained with a Gooner game label, but I'm not here to discuss that, especially for people who never play the game or just skip most of the dialogue. I think this video is for you because I don't really see a lot of people talking about this, within my circle at least. Like, yeah, players who are into the lore know what's going on, but the game's appeal mostly stays at surface level for casual and non-players. Anyways, I don't know if I'm just emotionally weak or easily manipulated or what, but this game has dragged me into the trenches and proved me wrong more times than I can count. I see an attractive character fully prepared to risk it all, only to get blindsided by some tragic backstory. Characters like Hugo, Harumasa, and Lighter, I expected to maybe enjoy their kits and personalities, not having to go down a rabbit hole of emotional damage. But it doesn't even stop at the ones I thought I'd like. Sometimes it's characters I had zero interest in, or I just feel like, yeah, they're kind of cool or whatever, and boom, I get attached and I start gambling for them too. And I am going to be brutally honest to address my main point of this video. I had no interest in Yuzua and Alice whatsoever in the beginning, even for Manatoe. Yes, I am guilty. But after playing the recent quest, guess what? They got me again. Suddenly, I do care. I do love them. I don't even like big buff male characters. I guess now I do. By the way, just a quick disclaimer. This video will contain major 2.1 spoilers, so keep that in mind. Anyway, if you've played the recent 2.1 quest, I know some of you are going to say, okay Kit, we get it, you're a sucker for sad tragic stories. And like, yeah, but hear me out. If that were really the case, then over half of the cast would be my favorite, which is not true. Let me defend myself. It's not just about slapping on a tragic backstory. That's easy. Anyone can be sad. What gets me is when a story actually makes a character's pain feel lived in. When the trauma isn't just there for shock value, but shapes how they talk, how they move, how they relate to people, hell, even how they dress. That's when I fall straight into the bait. But enough of that. Let's talk about Yuzua and Alice's story. In the latest chapter, we meet Alice, Yuzua, and Manatoe. All of them get dragged into a corruption investigation for different reasons. The story kicks off with a damaged Obscura shard, but the deeper they dig, it stops being just about exposing Porcelumix's shady business and starts becoming about them. Let's start with Alice. During our first encounter with her, I was slightly ticked off with how timid she is and the way she just runs off after we helped her. I think it's just the feeling of being, I don't know, misjudged when we had good intentions and got shut down. Like, hello? Rude. She talks super polite and Loki looks like she's about to apologize for existing. And at first, that just felt weak to me. Like, how are you supposed to survive anything in New Eridu like that? But then the story unfolds little by little. She was raised in a noble family with strict discipline and the kind of environment where your every move reflects on your family name. So, of course, she turned out like that. And to make it worse, she's carrying her family's fate in her hands since her grandfather is ill. The Timefields are one of the oldest noble families in New Eridu, and they own the patent for the anti-corruption medicine that basically everyone relies on. With her grandfather out of the picture, Alice was pushed into being the face of the family because someone had to, despite still being too young. And then Porcelumix basically guilt trips her into joining the investigation team to make their image look better, throwing all that pressure onto her like, if you mess this up, your family's entire legacy goes down with it. Like, damn. No wonder she's constantly tense. But that alone doesn't fully redeem my pure interest in her yet, which we will come back to this again later. And some of you might be wondering, why is she the only hope in her family? Where are her parents at? Her mother's passing is unknown in the story. Her father was believed to have died in an accident due to fatigue. When Alice was a kid, her father and grandfather brought her to a Porcelumix lab at Waifei Peninsula peninsula. They were about to head home when Alice realized she lost her favorite Sailor Boo hairpin and started crying over it, as kids do. So her father comforted her and promised to find it, said he still had some extra questions for the researchers anyway, and told them to drive off first and that he'd catch up later. And that is where the accident was believed to happen after. But spoiler alert, that whole story about the accident was a lie. One Alice believed her entire life. Turns out, her father never actually made it back because he got caught by Porcelumix after he discovered that they were conducting human experiments. Really didn't expect a dark turn there, honestly. But hey, let's talk about Yuzua now. Cool intro cutscene. But the moment she admits that she pulled a scare prank to Alice just to mess with her because she knew Alice wasn't a real representative for the investigation team was kinda immature. She gave the excuse that she just didn't think it through, realizing that Alice isn't one to fully blame here. Which, okay, I admit, pissed me off. Maybe I'm getting a little too triggered here, but hey, that means it's good writing. Yuzua isn't actually mean to Alice, but something about her attitude just rubbed me the wrong way from the start. She's super blunt, like that person with no filter. Most of the time, she's just underestimating and doubting Alice's competence in the beginning, mainly because she comes from a noble family. Like in Yuzuha's head, Alice is probably just some sheltered rich girl who got handed the role without working for it. So she assumes Alice doesn't know how the real world works and treats her like she's just here for show. And with Manatoe constantly having to explain things over, I know Yuzua doesn't actually mean harm. But if I were Alice, I'd be pretty annoyed too. But enough about my early impressions on Yuzua. Let me fill in her background for some of you. Yuzua was actually adopted by Uncle Lee Baorong. That's why her family name is different, Okinami. It comes from how Uncle Lee found her washed up by the shore at Salem Bay when she was a kid. It sounds a little crazy, and since Yuzua likes to make up stories to sell her products, I was skeptical in the beginning. Like, okay girl, sure, you drifted in from the sea, very mysterious, but nope, turns out that part was actually true. So here's Yuzuha's tragic backstory. Remember how I mentioned earlier how it started from a damaged Obscura shard? Yeah, what was supposed to be just a corruption investigation ended up dragging Yuzuha back to the one place she never wanted to return to. Turns out that holo that they were investigating wasn't just some shady illegal factory. It was a lab, the exact one she escaped from as a kid. Yuzua used to be one of the test subjects there, and the only one that remained, part of some disgusting human experimentation project by Porcelumix. And one day she managed to sneak into the vents because that's all the entertainment she has in there, but unfortunately the dosage they gave her that day was too strong and she fell asleep inside. Now, this is the moment where Alice and Yuzua were part of each other's story before they even knew it. I guess some of you can already connect the dots. On the same day, Alice, her father, and her grandfather were visiting the very same lab. Remember that Alice lost her Sailor Boo hairpin and cried about it, so her father went back to look for it? And he didn't just find the hairpin, he found Yuzua sleeping in the ventilation. And in that moment, he helped her escape. He placed her on a floating board and sent her down the sewer stream, staying behind to cover the escape route and try to confront Porcelumix. And as we already know, he never made it out. And where was that hairpin? Well, Alice accidentally dropped it into the vents where Yuzua was crawling and picked it up. Eventually, Yuzua floated all the way to shore, and that's where Uncle Lee found her. In the present, after finding out that she was the reason Alice's father died, the guilt crept in, and when Porcelumix was trying to capture all of them, Yuzua decided to stay behind. She helped the rest escape and turned herself into Porcelumix to stop them from coming after her friends. Again, pretty dark and heavy. I guess what Yuzua has gone through shapes a lot of her character, and it does makes us look at her differently. Yuzua isn't blunt or mean just for the sake of it. It's not that no one taught her such manners, it's that no one ever did. Growing up in a place where she was treated like a test subject kind of messes up how she's supposed to connect with people. She never really grew up with a family or friends before. Later on, she had Uncle Lee, who honestly tried his best, but even then, she never really got what family means. She even admits she just copies what other people do. And maybe that's why she acts like she doesn't care or denies it, because deep down, she doesn't even know what care is supposed to look like. This makes Yuzua the kind of person who acts like she doesn't need saving. Even when Alice's father tried to help, she literally said, "You didn't have to." So when she found out the truth, that he died because he chose to help her, of course her first instinct was to do the same. It was to repay that debt by giving herself up. That's what made sense to her. That's how she thinks love and connection works. Transactional. And that's what made Alice kinda furious. Losing her father was already a wound she learned to live with, but now she was about to lose the one person who proved that he didn't die for nothing. Yuzua is the living proof of that sacrifice, and she was throwing herself away like her life was just collateral. But the part that really got Alice that she couldn't accept was the reason. Her father chose to save Yuzua because it was the right thing to do. But Yuzua saved Alice and the others because she felt like she owed her life. This is what brings me back to why I'm genuinely drawn to Alice. Thinking back, my first impression of her wasn't too different from Yuzuha's, except I didn't say it in front of her face. Because she felt too proper, too obedient, like she was just trying to tick every box of what a good noble daughter should be. Always polite, always composed, always doing the right thing. And yeah, it's admirable and all, but it made her feel a little plain. Like the typical timid character boxed in by tradition, the kind who hesitates to act because it might break the rules. But the story quickly flips that perception when Alice stands her ground. Like the moment Yuzua questions her qualifications, Alice doesn't shrink back. She speaks up, shows she knows her worth, and proves she's not just some sheltered noble. And her character only grows from there. She starts to realize that playing it safe and staying out of trouble is basically the same as turning a blind eye. Doing nothing just means you're letting the wrong things happen, or even worse, accomplice it. But what really changed her was learning the truth about her father. That's what taught her something no elite school ever could. That being a true noble isn't about titles or reputation. It's about the courage to do what's right, especially when it's not the easy choice, even if it means stepping outside the rules. Alice's story ended up reminding me a few of things, and that education, no matter how prestigious, is not supposed to be a set of rules to blindly follow. It's meant to be a foundation or a tool, something you build on. Because the truth is, the kind of education from books, teachers, or even our own parents doesn't always teach us how to think for ourselves. The most impactful lessons in life come from experience, through loss, through having our beliefs shaken, that we can actually start learning what matters. And honestly, that's a message I'm glad younger players can take away from a game like this, which is also why I ended up really adoring Alice. Besides her goofy And for Yuzua, the story isn't just about exposing corruption, but also about Yuzuha's emotional development. It was about understanding something she's never truly had, what it means to care and be cared for. As a kid locked in a lab, she didn't get why Alice's father helped her. She didn't think she was worth saving, so she wrote it off as pity or weakness or just something humans do that made no sense to her. But Alice didn't give up on her when she stayed behind. And when Alice chose to come back, not out of guilt, but because she genuinely wanted Yuzua to live. And that's when it finally clicked that caring for someone isn't a transaction or some weird gesture she has to mimic like with her adopted family. It's just to be human, the willingness to care, even when there's nothing in it for you. That's how genuine connection begins. And if you thought I only started caring about Yuzua because of her tragic backstory, not quite. Knowing what she went through, yeah, it explained a lot about her snarky, guarded personality. It just stopped the initial image of her being difficult for no reason. But my interest in her came later. Watching her grow and realizing she's just a kid trying to figure out how genuine human connection works, just as lost as I was when I was younger. The kind of affection with hugs and words wasn't something I got much of growing up either. But as I grow older, I realize how much we take things like family and friendship for granted, how much those bonds actually matter, how human we really are for needing them. And maybe that's why I found myself rooting for Yuzua in the end, because watching her slowly figure it out felt like seeing a past version of myself finally start to grow too. Like I said before, most of ZZZ's narratives aren't written just for shock value or dramatic reveals. They've always been dropping hints here and there, but it's not until everything comes together that it really hits. And suddenly, it hurts way more because it started to make sense. And that's what makes the emotional payoff feel earned and not forced. The story prioritizes character understanding and emotional resonance over spectacle or twist. And I don't think I'm prepared to know how they'll flesh out Manatoe's story deeper once he's playable. Hopefully. I know this kind of narrative isn't everyone's cup of tea, and yeah, there's still plenty of room for improvement in the writing and pace, but I did love the way they used the Sailor Boo hairpin as a symbol for both, marking the moment Alice lost her father and the moment Yuzua was given a chance to live. What made the Sailor Boo hairpin so impactful wasn't just that it showed up again, but it's that the same object meant grief for Alice and luck for Yuzua. You don't often see stories explore both sides of that dynamic, like how one person's misfortune can become another's miracle. And when they do, they usually frame it around guilt or resentment, like the lucky one is made to feel ashamed, or the unlucky ones turn bitter, vengeful, or just left unresolved. No shade on those type of stories, by the way, but it's just to highlight how this story didn't really focus on that. Rather, it lets both characters exist with their pain and their gratitude without blaming each other for having more or less. Overall, so far, ZZZ is one of the few games that made me hooked to a lot of characters I didn't expect to, or feel way more for the ones I just thought were visually attractive. And with that, I've learned not to judge too early, but I'm also setting higher expectations now for any new character, especially the ones I find barely appealing for my taste, okay? So if the design doesn't do it for me, then the writing better be doing overtime to make up for that concept. Yeah, so that's all I have to yap about for this latest quest for now. If you enjoyed the yap session, feel free to subscribe and like the video and comment about characters you didn't expect falling for or falling deeper. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye!